CTV, both linear and CTV, are channels where category kings are made. And so in order to maximize the channel, get both that immediate lift as well as that long-term lift at maximum impact.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper. I run the marketing team here at Marketing Architects, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss, the CEO of Marketing Architects, and Rob DeMars, the Chief Product Architect of Misfits and Machines.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
We're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. Today, we're talking about which marketing channel combinations work especially well together. We're going to cover some best practices for creative, media buying, and measurement across channels. I was inspired to suggest this as a topic when I came across an article by Sophia Garrity for B&T, which is an Australian marketing pub. This caught my eye because the title is Kantar Study Finds Removing TV Could Reduce a Campaign's Impact by 39%. And obviously we love TV. This article covers a Kantar and ThinkTV study that analyzed 179 campaigns from 2017 to 2023 that measured how combinations of channels perform. They found that TV and out-of-home dominate for driving awareness, and they make up 4 out of the top 5 channel combos. And for driving sales, TV and social perform the best, with TV present in 3 out of 5 combos. And while some channels, TV and online display are 2, perform strongly on their own, others, like social and YouTube, rely heavily on being part of a multi-channel plan to deliver results. So I read that and I thought, this could be fun to chat about on the podcast because I've seen a lot of research about combining marketing channels, but I couldn't even remember what works the best together. I just know that if all else fails, you should add TV to whatever you're doing. And that's true. But I found some ThinkBox research that broke down nearly every channel you could think of, and they measured what they call the multiplier effect, which is how much one media boosts the performance of another when used in combination. And the good news is that most every channel boosts the performance of another. So if all else fails, having a diverse marketing mix is a good place to start, but the largest impacts were undoubtedly driven by TV, with the strongest combination being TV and cinema, followed by TV and social, TV and display, TV and radio, and TV and print. TV and online video and TV and direct mail were close behind. And to be honest, the other channel combinations kind of pale in comparison, but they also found out of home to be powerful when combined with print, social and radio to be powerful together, and I was surprised to see that display benefited print and cinema. Social media and generic search in general didn't generate huge benefits to other channels. And radio was also not quite as strong as I would have expected when you look at how it impacts other channels. So, and Rob, that's a lot of different combinations. Anything surprising there?
I saw in the report that search is the channel that is least lifted by TV in terms of a percentage, and that was 8%. Now, search is a big bucket, so an 8% lift is still a very meaningful number, but the thought that jogged for me was how many brands, in a quest to ensure TV's accountability, oftentimes brands are looking for ways to measure TV through a unique URL or a QR code scan. We only see on average 10% of response come through those channels. Not to say that you shouldn't use them, but to only look at that data. And then I think brands go to the next level, which is looking at search, looking at paid search, organic and direct are often the channels that TV sees impact through. So to see something like social media sees a 31% lift from TV, I think would be eye-opening for a lot of marketers in terms of, are they really fully measuring the impact of TV and its ability to drive performance across the board, across the marketing? The other thing that jumped out to me, I think worth calling to light, was that the study found that only 23% of the effect of TV is seen in the first 2 weeks.
Kicking off another one with an article from the Australians. We had Mark Ritson on before. It's just the think tank that's happening overseas here is pretty incredible. But yeah, I thought the whole thing was super interesting. And I'm going to agree with you on radio. I just feel like radio has this superpower in its ability of both frequency and its pricing and impressions with all the reach that it allows for. So the opportunity to reinforce cross-channel brand assets like taglines, jingles, promotions, it's such a flexible channel. And I happen to have a huge passion for audio. So I'm surprised it's not ranked higher in its ability to make 1 + 1 = 10.
It's kind of tough because I'll share the chart in the description of this podcast, but TV is so far and above. All the other channels, they still have an effect, but like radio is not too far behind the others. It just seems like so much smaller compared to TV, but it does boost it a little bit. But yeah, I was surprised too. I would think TV and radio would be closer together. Well, we have a very fun job because we get to work with the undeniable winner of these channels, which is TV. But I'm curious if our experience with our clients matches this research. And what channels do our clients typically see lifted the most when they start TV?
The report referenced some pretty big numbers in terms of the lift seen on a channel as a cost-effective TV, radio, print, social media, online display, all lifting by upwards of 30%. And I think that desire to measure that immediate impact can be distracting in terms of the potential that the channel holds. I think brands have long thought of TV as a brand building channel, but now with more sophisticated methods of measurement, sophisticated and sometimes misleading too, I would say. We can detect how TV drives immediate sales, but we don't want that to limit the potential of TV by only looking at those short-term effects. Some of the biggest impacts we often see are TV's impact on digital as well as on direct mail. We see that often as well.
So it sounds great to just add as many marketing channels as you can to your marketing mix, but that's not without challenges, one of which is creative. So how do you have consistent messaging across channels? People know who you are, what you stand for, how you help them, but also adapt your messages to suit different channels because they all vary quite a bit in what they do and like how people feel and what mindset they're in when they go there. So Rob, you've seen clients take radio creative to TV, TV creative to digital. So you've seen, people adapt their creative for different channels. How do you think marketers should think about, deploying creative if they're invested in multiple marketing channels?
The most obvious and important thing is that you're following some overarching brand framework. Every agency has their own kind of version of this, but it looks like a house and you have a roof and the roof has the main message, and then that main message can be respected all the way down to the smallest asset, right? Down to the foundation of the house. So everything can feel consistent. So that's table stakes. I think coming from that, though, is having an idea that's big enough, that has legs, that can really be able to transcend any channel. Obviously, one of the classic campaigns out there is the gecko for Geico. Say that 3 times fast. But again, they've been able to translate that cute critter across all channels. He's memorable, easily transferable and transplantable from one channel to the next. And then how are you sharing the creative learnings cross-channel? And you had mentioned we definitely have seen how great radio commercials can become great TV commercials, and how great TV commercials can become great social ads, and how great headlines from digital can become great radio ads. So it's like the circle of life, right? And how are you continuing to learn from each other, borrow what works, share what doesn't work across channel? That doesn't mean everything is going to be, replicated exactly as it was. All the different video channels out there behave slightly differently. Some feature more audio, some feature no audio, some feature different time frames that you have to respect as well. So it's not that everything is just copy paste, but definitely learning from what's happening to your sister channel is critically important.
You mentioned like ideas should have legs. And I think just as our marketing team, I've definitely felt that. Like sometimes you'll have a spot that you're working on for the agency and the like ads just seem to write themselves for digital. And then other times it can just feel so challenging to like break it down and move it across channels. So
what's even worse is when you have an awesome idea that you just love, but you're like, there's nowhere else this can go. And are you willing to put that one in the garbage can? Because that's hard as well. You have to recognize, gosh, it doesn't matter how clever, amazing this one execution is. If it's not repeatable, it's not scalable.
Marketing effectiveness can probably help here too. Because one thing that I was shocked by, and it was like a nerd alert we did a while ago, it was something about attention and how long people actually focus on different channels. Like how long do you need to see the ad to actually remember it? And with some channels, like YouTube, for example, I remember I was shocked by if you don't have like non-skippable YouTube ads, how little they'll actually be viewed. People are probably going to view like 1 to 2 seconds, or a display ad, like just How much time are people going to spend on that? That could probably help too. That's a great thing about TV. It's like you got a 30-second ad. Okay, I'm pretty sure most people are going to hear at least like the whole 30 seconds. But so I was surprised by that. That could be maybe a way marketers, like you could even compare, like as you're creating ads for different channels, like just how long do we think people are going to have? And are they only going to recognize like a color or a shape or a phrase? And maybe that could help break down how you like create them across
Absolutely.
channels. Another challenge when you're buying across multiple marketing channels is the actual buying itself. And some brands buy all their media through one DSP, like the Trade Desk. Others choose to break up their buying and connect to different DSPs or agencies that specialize in certain channels. So, Ange, what approach do you think works best when your brand wants to buy across multiple marketing channels?
That's sort of a philosophical debate. And I think we feel that often brands live in one camp or the other. Maybe it's how they've grown up or how they were educated by their mentors or their leadership. But I think the larger players like the Trade Desk, et cetera, out there have just had to solve for many forms of media, publishers, device types, different types of retail clients versus D2C clients, CPG, et cetera. So what happens there is that the capability gets so broad, it's hard to be best in class, right, in any specific area. Our view is that TV, both linear and CTV, are channels where category kings are made. These are extremely important channels to get right if you're going to do it. And so in order to maximize the channel, get both that immediate lift as well as that long-term lift at maximum impact, it's best to work through a DSP or an agency that has specialized experience in that space. You know, it might require more resources to manage, another platform to manage, or another agency to work through, versus having kind of one plug into a larger DSP where you can transact all of your mobile video and display and et cetera. But the return on the channel is well worth the added resourcing.
It almost reminds me of professional athletes. Like even like for something like triathlon, these professionals, they don't have just one coach that works across everything. Even though you could train with the best triathlete in the world, you're going to have a swimming coach. You're going to have a nutrition coach. You might even have a separate running coach. And like brands should probably consider the same thing. Like it's just going to be impossible to find one DSP that's going to be best in class across all these channels. And when you're in a competitive market, how worth it is it for you to go through a little bit more pain to use multiple DSPs or multiple agencies? But if you want the best, you're probably going to have to pick and choose.
Absolutely. I love that analogy. It makes a ton of sense. And especially in today's marketing world where it's more complex than it's ever been. The amount of data and tech specs on one platform versus the next, it's just almost impossible to know it all and do it well if we're trying to kind of work through one quote unquote coach.
So maybe the biggest challenge with multi-channel marketing is measurement. And that's one reason why a lot of brands will say, I want to just use one DSP because then at least I can measure everything in one platform. Lots of channels working together is difficult to measure because no channel works in isolation. And I think we can see now there's this trend of more marketers reinvesting in MMMs to try to have this more holistic picture of marketing results. And we work with a lot of clients on multi-channel measurement because TV drives other channels so much. And sometimes those pesky channels like to take credit for TV's hard work. So, Ange, do we have a recommendation of how to maybe both philosophically and practically measure a multi-channel marketing strategy?
It's definitely a balance. If we just talk about TV for a minute, that's our area of expertise. So like I said earlier, more modern forms of measurement, so IP-based attribution, and with a broad enough device graph, a little retargeting in your campaign, I would venture to say it's possible to make any CTV campaign look like it's working. And that happens all the time. We have brands come to us with stories of running TV for a year. They thought it was working, they scaled it, and then they realized it wasn't working after they had put millions into the channels. We start this podcast by talking about how channels have cross impacts on other channels, and they do, but I don't believe, going back to the stat that ThinkBox found TV short-term 2-week impact makes up only 23% of its total impact, that you should turn a cheek to the short term in favor of the long, because I think you can get caught in that situation of like, it's only 23%. I've got IP-based attribution. We're using a device graph. Looks like it's working. So I think the most practical advice that we can give would be what we always say, measure the short and the long with multiple models. Channels will have cross impacts on each other. Often in order to see those, there needs to be some diligence to ensure that test designs are structured really well. If we're wanting to understand TV's impact on direct mail, in addition to getting reads in other ways like MMM, we might need to conduct an incrementality test with a control holdout and really have willingness to keep the other marketing channels constant and steady within that control group so that impact of a new channel can be read cleanly. I often feel that marketing teams are under a lot of pressure, right, these days to move business performance. And sometimes it's a tough call to have that patience to get that read versus answering to the short-term needs of the company.
So, Ange, one thing that I heard Mark Ritson say recently, I think it was in a work interview, he was talking about how marketers sometimes spend too much time optimizing outputs instead of inputs, and they become obsessed with this type of measurement. It's very complicated. Like, sounds like a lot of time to really set up enough measurement models. And that's where you can see, like, working with an agency that could help you is pretty helpful. But do you think that the majority of marketers are too obsessed with measuring everything? Or do you think the majority aren't actually investing enough time and energy to measure like the overall impact?
If we go back to kind of the purpose of this podcast and why we started it, there's a bit of an effectiveness crisis going on within marketing, especially in the US. And he would agree a little bit behind. I'll say it a little nicer than he would say. But I think the obsession more lies on the side of over measurement. It feels, with so much modern data and so much technology, it almost, I think, feels to marketers at times that when you think about structuring an incrementality test, literally we could split the country in half. That feels like measurement of 1984 versus IP-based attribution and ACR technology. And these things have value, but I think we've just tipped to the side of we can measure the immediate impact. And so we sort of forget that not everyone is going to respond immediately. And there are a lot of ways for over attribution to happen with those types of methods as well. So it's a tricky thing because on one side, you look at it and go, well, if over attribution is happening, is that kind of making up for kind of that long-term effect? But I think we're all in a quest to get the answer. When we have data, we think we have the answer, and then we try to optimize to it. And I think that's what he's talking about versus putting more applied effort into how do we structure tests and how do we really go out and learn what radio does to cinema or television does to digital in a way that maybe was the mindset of marketers trying to measure effectiveness years ago.
The over obsession is on like the short term over optimizing, but then there's a lack of maybe awareness about just what the long-term effects could be. We like marketing effectiveness because we're not saying that it's easy to measure those things, but at least you know what to look for. If I run TV, social should experience something. To see it doesn't mean it's easy. It's like a belief thing, right? Like I believe that if I turn on TV and I run this much, I should see these longer term impacts, and like having the patience and the belief. And that must be hard too, just like at a company level. Like your CFO and your CEO also needs to share the same belief system that they're looking for the longer term impacts of marketing.
Often TV is sort of the last channel that marketers go to try to get new customer acquisition and scale after they've maxed out digital, et cetera. So they apply the mindset of the prior channels to the new channel. And I think TV is a channel that you sort of have to stop and pause and go, yes, of course, it can drive immediate performance. We can measure via IP, via ACR, via last click, whatever the method might be. But also TV is a channel that has powers that other channels don't. And we talk about how every channel has some type of superpower. So how are you making sure when you're thinking about the inputs, what ideally would TV do in terms of maybe your ability to command pricing power against your competition or navigate an economic downturn or increase stock interest? Those are things that you might not think of naturally versus we want new customer acquisition and we want conversion rates. Of course we do. But if you're not looking for those impacts, you're definitely not going to see them. They don't just jump out at you. And so that design of what you want TV to do is extremely important. And working with a team that can help design some test structures that would help you see those impacts. Because those are often the biggest impacts that you find with television.
More fun too.
For sure. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of fun, Rob, I want to ask you about your favorite topic, which is AI. You're very locked in to the AI and marketing conversation.
I love it.
when I was making the outline for this episode, I was like, AI has to have an impact here. Like anytime there's complexity, frustration, AI is going to do something. So what do you think it's going to do?
It's a super exciting conversation right now. I'm going to kind of skip the usual suspects. I think there's a lot of tactical benefits cross-channel around enhanced personalization, automation, efficiencies, improved targeting, all that good stuff. But I think the juicy conversation right now is around leveling up brand management as it relates to AI. And this is going to be a growing topic. AI is not just a tool, it is a co-pilot, right? It takes something and it continues to build upon it. And when you trust it with your brand, there's implications there. And as marketers, you can either give up or level up when it comes to AI. You can be like, I just don't even want to touch it, or I want to be all in and better understand how I can have a relationship with it. And so it can help me to manage my brand. And I guess to toot your horn here for a second, Elena, I think we have a great example of that in an asset generator that was created by your team. And it was important for you guys to create something on top of an LLM that produced branded assets that were in line with the brand guidelines, but also it was very important for you to identify what you don't want to be, right? And to create guardrails within your AI system so you can allow it to have the freedom to roam and to create, but also not violate some core principles of your brand. So I think this is going to be a new skill for marketers. I think it's going to be incredibly exciting and intimidating at the same time. But I think we have to be having those conversations now. If you're a brand and you're not looking at how your brand can have a relationship and get better and get superpowers with AI, you're absolutely going to be left behind. And I think that's a really exciting but new skill that we're going to have to expect out of brand managers.
Asset creation is such a great point, Rob, because you have all these different channels, all this different creative. And yeah, Greg on our team, he created a system that can help us create branded images. And it's like really good already. And it's getting better. And for us, like we don't run ads across as many platforms as a typical D2C brand would. Like at MA, we do LinkedIn, I think of the general like B2B things, but we create a lot of decks and a lot of presentations as a company. And that's been super helpful for us is to create unique imagery that's on brand. But yeah, I can totally see how if you're a marketer and you're running across multiple channels, that's just going to be a game changer to get to create a bunch of creative, test it. And also one thing, last thing, LinkedIn ads. Everybody uses the same stock imagery and I just scroll right by it. It's driving me nuts. It just gets so repetitive. I'm like, man, B2B brands have got to start using AI because you could create your own unique custom imagery in all of your ads. And that's fun to think about. Like, I'd love to see my LinkedIn feed full of more like unique ads.
You're absolutely right. The exponential growth that your brain can experience by just turning on that switch is amazing. The amount of our image library that you guys have created, it's endless now. It's truly endless and customizable. And you don't have to go, this image isn't quite right for this presentation. We'll make another one.
The downside is the tools are slightly addictive. We'll get into Adobe Firefly. I just spent an hour just like recreating this image of an astronaut walking on Mars with dandelions. Like I love it, but it's like a dopamine. It's almost like scrolling through TikTok, just like image. But totally. Other than that, it's great. All right. So I thought this would be kind of a fun way to wrap up. Let's pretend we're running marketing for a D2C brand. If you could only spend money on 2 marketing channels, which would you choose? And we're going to eliminate TV as an option because we're all going to pick TV because that's the clear choice here is to pair something with TV. So Rob, kick us off. What 2 would you pick besides TV?
Well, I mentioned before, I deeply love audio and I deeply love podcasting. And I think for the right D2C brand on the right show is game changing. And you see that so often with things like on the Huberman podcast, et cetera. I would probably target in on SmartList just because I'd really like to meet Jason Bateman. So I would do some highly relevant podcast. And then on the flip side, on the digital route, I'm going to go with TikTok and using an AI influencer, just because we mentioned before, there's just growing research that those AI influencers are actually outperforming humans. And since I kind of like me some AI, let's do a TikTok campaign using an AI influencer.
Ange, what about you?
You took TV off the table, so I was going to choose TV. I do have to go down the digital route. I mean, obviously, just thinking about our own behavior as consumers and the amount of time that we spend on our phones, on our iPads, on our computer. Plus, I think sometimes folks think that we hate digital. We don't hate digital at all. To the point of this podcast today, it's a great pair together. The other one that I would mention, and it's cheating a little bit, but when I think of channel, I think of a means by which consumers can get to a path to purchase. And D2C is very limited by physical availability. And so I would push a D2C brand into retail, their own stores, depending on what the D2C brand was. But I think that space is very limited in terms of its ability to have mass scale without the physical availability component that exists with how we shop. We do like e-commerce, but the vast majority of shopping still occurs in person.
I think that counts. I love seeing like in Target when brands do retail activations too, where you walk by, they have like their own pop-up or something like that. So taking away TV was tough for this one, but I think if I was running a D2C brand, you're competing in sometimes a sea of sameness, trying to get people's attention. I would have to pick some type of digital channel, pick Meta. I've bought, very specifically targeted Instagram ads before for D2C brands. So I'd pick that as kind of my staple. And then I'm going to go a little crazy. I'm going to pick out of home. I would use half my marketing budget on an absurd out of home campaign. I'd pick one market. If I'm a D2C brand, I'm trying to stand out. It's so difficult. I think it'd be better off to go all in on one thing and try to have a really big impact than spend time just like chipping away online. So this isn't really a D2C brand, maybe it is, but there is a realtor here in Minnesota called Chris Lindahl, and he has these billboards with his arms outstretched, like guaranteed offer. If anyone's in Minnesota, you're going to hate me mentioning this because people kind of hate them because they're everywhere. But he used that to disrupt the real estate market, essentially. He invested all in out of home and he's kind of ubiquitous now. People don't really like him. So I don't know if long-term like how it's going to work out, but
it's awkward. It's a little awkward.
I would create ads that would just be delightful.
It's kind of crazy the impact that campaign has made, considering he's just standing there with his arms stretched out, The guaranteed offer component, of course, has weight to it too. But
it uses the channel well because of the dimensions.
And there are a lot of out-of-home marketers that do not use that channel well. We've all had that experience where we drive by and go, I can't read what you'd want me to read.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But if you're not a hugger, those billboards are uncomfortable. I don't think I want to hug that guy.
Yeah, and driving down like the main highway in Minnesota, seeing out-of-home ads, I literally saw some this week and I thought, I'll always be employable as long as there's like out-of-home ads, because I feel like I could really help. Like I could help at least write, like, I don't know, create a fun. We should do an out-of-home campaign. It's just so
That'd be fun.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Ayana Klaphocky for producing the show and Taylor De Los Reyes for editing. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find the show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to our weekly email newsletter. It's built for marketers seeking research-first analysis of the latest trends. You can go to marketingarchitects.com/newsletter to subscribe. Now go forth and build great marketing.
I just ate too many cheeseburgers last night off the grill. I just kept going.
How many cheeseburgers did you eat?
Like 3/4 of a pound. I ate 4 of them.
Oh my God.
I thought you were going to say you were having sliders.
They don't feel good.
Marketing Architects.